Welcome to part 6 of the series on the 2007 Mackyard incident. All right, so just to recap before we keep going, the Mackyard incident was a CN rail yard, one of their largest yards outside of Toronto in Canada. And although this happened in 2007, the reason the Mackyard incident is so important is because what would come out of that incident would be a report which was the first attempt to overhaul all training programs for frontline rail workers. And even though the Mackyard incident happened 18 years ago, that overhaul to this day has yet to happen. The document that came out of the Mackyard incident was actually, in my opinion, a total public scam, and we're going to get into that. But again, just to recap, Mackyard involved a fake qualified conductor who had less than 50% of the required training to work in that yard, and potentially as little as 37%. If the union contract necessitated 60 tours prior to being a qualified conductor to work in Mackyard. And that's going to be something I have to look at. Again, I have to pull up the union contracts. That's going to be a whole other video on its own. But anyway, the incident involved dangerous goods. 2 chlorine gas cars actually derailed outside of Toronto. Luckily, they were not breached. Other cars that were breached were diesel fuel cars, and they spilt literally thousands of liters. But when the Mackyard incident happened, clearly Transport Canada knew it had some massive problems as far as fake qualification of frontline rail workers. And I think they knew before that, and we're going to get into that too. So that's where we left off, and that's what is some of the stuff that's covered in previous videos on the Mackyard incident, and why the Mackyard incident is so critical to what's going on today in 2025, as Transport Canada now has it as one of its priorities to overhaul the Railway Employee Qualification Standards regulation, which has to do with all frontline rail worker training programs. The belt pack operators, the RTC or rail traffic control, and also the maintenance of weight or the track guys have never been included in the regulation as far as having standardized training programs that they had to be qualified in order to operate in their operational categories. And there's quite frankly no excuse for that. There are so many accidents that involve belt pack or remote control locomotive operations that they should have been included in the regulation a long time ago. So we're going to keep going here. And if you look at page, let's see, this would have been on page 14 and 15 of this report, which was R07T0270, having to do with the Mackyard incident. That's the name of the railway investigation report done by the Transportation Safety Board. One of the things that's mentioned on page 14 had to do with train handling in belt pack training course. On chapter 7, and this is a CN course, and I think I have that document somewhere, which I had requested via Freedom of Information. And but this is all that they basically mention here. And I'm going to get into a whole other video series having to do just with belt pack, because you're going to see some of the dirty tricks, in my opinion, that have been going on in the rail industry. But anyway, it says here that the Chapter 7 of the Belt Pack Training Course for CN is devoted to train handling. It describes the 4 main forces that act on a cut of cars: vertical, lateral, buff, and draft forces. The section describes conditions that amplify track/train forces. Working with long cuts of cars. Working with combinations of heavy and light rail cars. Combinations can cause problems if they are not dispersed evenly throughout the cut. So, having all of the light cars at one end versus all of the heavy cars at another end, those types of issues having to do with weight certainly affect movements of remote control locomotive operations in our yard. And then let's see, they have the anchor effect, which is an effect that is produced when a car or locomotive acts as an anchor to the movement. So the section discusses how to handle in-train forces with long or heavy car cuts in order to avoid what's called stringlining, or the tendency of a long cut of cars to shortcut a curve when being pulled. In other words, if it shortcuts the curve, it's probably derailing. Or jackknifing, which everybody knows what a jackknife is. So that can also happen with belt pack movements and cause derailments. And that happens particularly on curves again, and causes the jackknifing causes rail cars to accordion. So it also provides advice on how to use gradual speed changes to manage in-train forces. Here's the key part. There is no discussion on how train length, tonnage, or topography can affect train braking distances. Seems to me that those types of things, the length, the tonnage, and especially topography, especially when you're kicking rail cars uphill, and that absolutely was being done at CN Rail, and has been done for a very long time, and it has indeed resulted in deaths. And so, fake qualifying again, we're going to excuse, we're not even going to discuss these critical issues during remote control locomotive operations training. And again, I'm going to get into a whole series just on belt pack training, and that's going to be pretty eye-opening too. So we're going to keep going here. All right, so on page 15 and 16 of this same report, you can see this section here where they had the simulator training in remote control yard operations. But if you look at the second arrow there, it says, while not currently used in Canadian Class 1 railroad operations, a United States Class 1 railroad has developed and incorporated the remote the simulator training into its training since 2007. Who cares? If it's not being used in Canada, why even have this in here? Especially since at the time of this writing, only one Class 1 rail carrier in the US had implemented simulator training for remote control operations. This is a completely useless section, and it's what I call report filler. There's no other way to put it. Transport Canada is trying to do what it can to separate the accident, the incident and stuff, what happened, and the belt pack program versus the analysis of that. So one of them, again, was provided on page, I think, 14, and then there's all this filler in between, and then we get to the actual analysis of the belt pack training program on page 23, almost 10 pages later. Again, are you going to remember all the problems with the belt pack that happened in Mackyard by the time you get to page 23? Probably not. And that, in my opinion, is why the Transportation Safety Board does this. It's just like, when conductor trainee Jason Clooney died, it took over 3 years for his case to get to the Occupational Health and Safety Tribunal of Canada. Time and distance. Who's going to care after a certain amount of time? Who's going to remember? So distance also applies in these reports. Who's going to remember? Who's going to go back and reread certain sections? The average person will not be doing that. Then we get into this section here, the TSB laboratory analysis. This is where they basically try and recreate the accident and say, okay, how much braking distance did they need? How much did they have? How long did it take for the belt pack to to respond and whatever. So that I'm not going to get into at all, because you can read this if you want. Just pause the video and you can read it. I'm not going to get into this. We tried to recreate it stuff. You know, if Transport Canada and the Transportation Safety Board really cared about employees, they would have addressed these issues a very, very, very long time ago. They knew they had problems in 2007. You're going to see they knew they had problems before that. But why are they now in 2025 finally going to try to overhaul frontline worker training programs? It's because they know that this is their year of disclosure, with not only Canadians getting on board with this, as far as taxpayers, rail investors, whatever, but also U.S. Class 1 rail carriers and U.S. regulators, because I've decided I'm a U.S. citizen. And, you know, I may live in Canada, but I'm a naturalized U.S. citizen. And when Canada allowed all these rail executives to escape to the U.S. to become extremely high-level rail executives in the U.S. rail industry, when in my opinion they don't belong in boardrooms, they belong in courtrooms, there's an issue with that. And so I told Transport Canada and all of the Trudeau and Carney administration, they know this is their year of disclosure. And I think that might explain something else we're going to see in this video. But anyways, so I'm not going to get into this laboratory thing. If you want to read it, just pause the video and read it. Okay, I wasn't going to cover the section on other related yard accidents, but you know, when I get that little voice, look up these reports or look something up, I always listen to that little voice. And so had that little voice again yesterday and decided to look up these other related yard accidents pertaining to this Mac Yard incident of 2007 report. And on page 17, you can see here where I have 2 green arrows. One of them is showing there was an incident on March 19th of 2007. That would have been before the 2007 Mac Yard incident, which is the subject of this entire series and the subject of this particular report. But I decided to look for that report. And what's interesting here is that here in this belt pack incident, it was a supervisor that was involved. So it kind of makes you wonder, geez, I wonder if that guy was fake qualified too. So when I saw that, I really wanted to look at this report. And it said, while attempting to set the handbrake, the employee lost his footing and fell to the ground in the path of the L1 wheel. Kind of sounds like an ugly accident involving a supervisor who should have known better and who should have been more careful, but losing your footing happens. But anyways, I had wanted to see if this guy had been potentially fake qualified, because how long has this been going on, the fake qualifications at CN Rail? That was my question. But anyway, then I wondered, okay, well, let's just look this up. And so if you look on the right here, what I have is information from the Transportation Safety Board website, where you go and you look for all railway investigation reports. And the header for the bottom section, because I had to scroll down to get that, shows the investigation status. So you'll see below, these ones on the screen print show completed, what the investigation number is, the occurrence date. Okay, well, I'm looking for something that happened on March 19th, 2007. Look at that, where I have that red arrow there, that on the right, that report is missing. It's not there. Why would that be? You know, you gotta wonder, where did that report go to? So let's see if this is just a once, you know, there might be a reason, I don't know, fell off. I can't can't see a reason for this report disappearing, especially since it's so old. But okay, whatever. Let's go look for the other one. Okay, the second report that I would be looking for would be for an incident that happened in Mac Yard again, but this time on November 18th of 2008, which would have been after the Mac Yard incident of 2007. And by the way, this would have again all been happening under Keith Creel, who was the Chief Operations Officer at CN Rail at the time. And Keith Creel is now the CEO at CPKC. So, okay, let's look and see if we could find that report. So it would be again November 18th, 2008. So if I go to the Transportation Safety Board website, and you can see at the very bottom there that I did a screen print that captures the date on which I did these screen prints, and the date on this is September 14th. And so again, behold, a report is missing. So both reports pertaining to belt pack incidents, which are discussed in the 2007 Mac Yard incident, and both of these would have had to do with Mac Yard incidents, they're both missing. How do you explain that, Transport Canada and Transportation Safety Board? Is it because maybe you thought somebody might be going back and looking at these reports, like maybe me, because you knew that this is going to be your year of disclosure? And boy, those two reports, when you look at that second incident, the employee was attempting to open a knuckle while the movement was still in motion and was caught between the couplers. That sounds like that one could definitely be a fatality. Now, just to make sure that these reports weren't somehow hidden under a different category like fatality, I also did searches for fatalities on the Transportation Safety Board website. Jason Clooney's report showed up, but these two, which I don't know if they were fatalities or not, but they sure seem like they could be, but these two did not show up. So they're not hidden under some special category like fatality, and they're certainly not under the general search for incidents that would have happened in those years. And so again, Transport Canada and Transportation Safety Board, why are these reports missing? Why have they been removed? Good question. Do we have a good answer to that, Minister of Finance, former Minister of Finance, and now Minister of Transportation, Chrystia Freeland? I don't trust the government of Canada any further than I can throw them when it comes to all of these railway investigation reports. And when I see stuff like this, that the reports have been removed, who's going to notice that a 2007 report and a 2008 report are missing? Probably nobody. Who would even be searching for these reports? Probably only somebody who had a reason to search because maybe they were looking into the 2007 Mac Yard incident and what that would reveal. So I'm very interested now in getting a copy of both of these reports so that I can further analyze belt pack operations in Mac Yard. So I will be requesting these, and I'm sure that I'll probably be doing videos on them because they're sure to reveal wonderful nuggets, especially if they've been removed online. That's just my humble opinion. But again, you're free to form your own. Okay, so the other reports that are discussed in the Mac Yard incident, on page 17, you can see here there was another incident, but this one was in Kamloops in 2006. It was another belt pack incident. That one is actually online. So that one is there. and not tied to Mackyard. So I guess that might explain why that one is still there. Just my humble opinion. All right, there was also a February 13th, 2007 incident in the Manitoba area. And again, not Mackyard, so that one does appear online. Isn't that an amazing coincidence that just those Mackyard reports are missing? I find that to be an absolutely amazing coincidence. All right, finally, there was an August 4th, 2007 belt pack incident in British Columbia that is also mentioned in the 2007 Mackyard incident report. That one also is online. So all of the reports they mention are there except those that pertain to Mackyard. Why are those missing? And I really suspect it's because the current overhaul of the Railway Employee Qualification Standards Regulation that is going on now, 18 years later, that was first supposed to have been done in 2007 because of the Mackyard incident. And so why am I just not surprised to see other belt pack Mackyard incident reports removed from the Transportation Safety Board website? Just coincidence, right? Just those two reports, just coincidence. I don't think so. But hey, I'm not a conspiracy theorist either. I just have my eyes wide open when it comes to the corrupt government of Canada. All right, so that will then take us to a section at the bottom here where it says Transport Canada Review of CN Operating Practices, where I have the two arrows that are joined together going to the red block at the bottom. For that analysis, I covered that previously. That is the analysis of Transport Canada, and you can either refer to part 4 of the Mackyard Incident Series for that section's analysis, or you could refer to part 5. That part 4 would be on the Rail Families United YouTube channel, and the other place you can find it would be as part 5 under Operational Excellence pertaining to the UP-NS merger YouTube channel. So I've already covered that section, and so that will do it for this. All right, the audit that was covered in a previous video was on pages 18 and 19 of the Mackyard Incident Report. That takes us to page 20. Page 20 has this statement: Qualification standards and training for operating crews. That's what the section is entitled. I'm not going to read this whole section because it's a little paragraph that has so much deception in it. It's going to require its own video. And so I'm going to cover this in part 7. All right. There is so much deception in that one little paragraph on page 20 that, yeah, it's going to require its own video, and you do not want to miss that one, because I think that's going to give us some answers that maybe the public might have been looking for, and certainly rail families, as far as what it may reveal. So I'm going to end it here for part 6 of the Mackyard incident. So have a great day, and I will see you in a most enlightening and eye-opening part 7.